For those of us whose lives were permanently affected by the events of September 11th, 2001, yesterday's news cycle was painful and infuriating. After September 11th, we used to say never forget to each other. Never forget what happened. Never forget who did this. Never forget. People seem to have forgotten. Even worse, people who work in Joe Biden's Justice Department. The announcement came surreptitiously that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 other co-conspirators of the 9/11 attacks are a whisker away from a plea deal with the federal Justice Department that would allow them to avoid the death penalty. Joining us right now to discuss that is a man who was there at Ground Zero at what was the World Trade Center on September 11th and participated in the cleanup, participated on the identification of remains of his brothers in the New York Police Department, Rob O'Donnell. Rob, of course, also a radio talk show host on WILK in Pennsylvania. Rob, thanks for joining us on this.
Thank you, Larry. Not just my brothers and sisters, but also the 3,000 Americans that were perished that day, that were attacked and murdered.
So, first of all, my understanding is the way the word got out about this to the families was almost as offensive as the actual news itself. How did victims' families find out about this?
The FBI and the Department of Justice, along with the Pentagon, sent a letter to survivors' families notifying them that they were in the tail end of reaching this plea deal. And the letter was dated August 1st. I received from three survivors. I received notice of the letter and copies of the letter that they received last Friday, and 2 of them this Monday. And the deadline for them to make comments, which is just the FBI comment line that they were given, is this coming Monday. So they were given a week to process this information, that there was a plea deal in effect that takes the death penalty off the table, and that the families could make comment and questions on it. Not be against it, not be oppose it, but comments and questions.
Yeah, it's the FBI or the DOJ's ability to just say, we heard you. That we'll ignore you, but at least we heard you. You had your say.
Yeah, the mere fact that this letter went out to the families, to the survivors, surviving family members, shows you that this is in the tail end. This is a done deal. They are at the end of this. This is just a process to say, hey, we notified the families. We wanted to get their opinion on it. But no, they really didn't.
And I don't know, when you talk to families and you personally, your reaction to this, I mean, part of it has to do with the death penalty, yes, but also part of it is just lawyers negotiating a deal and making it go away. I mean, there's something cathartic and there's real closure to having that day in court, hearing the evidence, getting a verdict. That's important to this whole thing, isn't it?
It is, but why are we still dealing with this 20 years later? This should have been swift justice. They attacked America. They attack Americans. We are still dying from this. My friends that work side by side with me are still, we've lost 3 times as many first responders and people who live there, and the workers due to the health effects of the attacks on Ground Zero to this day, and they're still dying. And this is just, it's enraging. It's truly enraging.
Do you have an inkling as to why, first of all, it's been drawn out this long and why the Justice Department's decided to do this plea deal? I hear that it's because of objections to the CIA's waterboarding and extraordinary interrogation efforts. I also hear from some sources in D.C., Rob, and I'd love for you to react to it, that the intelligence agencies don't want certain things to be revealed as KSM and these conspirators make their defense.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit of all of the above, but again, 20 years for this process to take place. Quite honestly, I think with all the bad news that we're getting, if you look across the board, the metrics that measures an administration are all down. They're all in the 30% and less. I think this is just the Biden administration's way to spike the football and say, hey, I closed Gitmo on my watch. But it's not closing Gitmo. Gitmo's still going to be there. It's a naval base. It's a Marine base. It's not going anywhere. These 4 or 5 people might be going somewhere else, but the system doesn't change. It's just all a charade.
Yeah, and that's an important point. Yeah, he'll be able to say we don't have any more 9/11 suspects, terrorists at Gitmo, but that also means they're going to be moved to a federal penitentiary. They'll be here in our mainland. These evil, horrible pieces of slime will be amongst inmates in a federal penitentiary. That actually is even worse.
Yeah, do they become martyrs if we hold them, in lifetime confinement? Do they still get their message across? They will still talk through lawyers. They will still have avenues to reach their supporters. And don't be fooled by this. What's going on with this plea deal? There are still plenty of people who want to kill Americans, and this changes nothing. And again, the mere fact that these people are breathing any air, regardless of if it's in a prison or not, is enraging to me.
It also draws a little attention to, I remember what it was like in those 2 years after the September 11th attacks, and President Bush at the time was pretty focused on tracking these people down and letting them feel justice. And there was pressure. There was pressure on President Bush at the time, don't go out and just kill people. We got to do this the right way. We're the United States of America. We're going to arrest them and we're going to try them in a court of law. It was a very different story with Osama bin Laden when Obama was president. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. There was so much pressure on Bush because remember we had this image. We were a cowboy and we were just, taking Old West law and order. And it's like, you know what? There's something cathartic and actually appropriate about Old West kind of law and order. Find the guy and kill him for what he did. Period.
When there's not justice, when there's not repercussion, we've seen what happens in our cities. What do you think is going to happen in the terrorist community? We're asking ourselves again for this to happen.
That's a great point. Whenever we don't administer justice and don't flex our might when we are done wrong, that sends the message to the terrorists like, hey, go ahead and do this. What's the worst that can happen? And well, we're seeing that.
Yeah, and it just goes to show what kind of cowards these terrorists truly were. I mean, the fact of they want to meet their maker at the end. They want to meet their God or whoever they pray to. This has nothing to do with that. He's doing, and his lawyers team and his legal team is doing everything they can to avoid the death penalty. They're cowards. We've always said they were cowards, and now that's just coming to fruition. Took 20 years later, but they are still the cowards that hid behind planes.
That is a great point. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed put together this plan and recruited 19 patsies to go and kill themselves to wreak this evil havoc on our nation and on 3,000 innocent lives. But he himself tries to squirrel away and sleaze away from any kind of death penalty, even if it would be a lot more humane than what those poor bastards had to suffer. I'll let you have the last word here. You deserve it, Rob.
Yeah, not just humane. I mean, look at him and his weasel lawyers dealing with this for 20 years, dragging us on, using every legal recourse they can to now reaching a deal with the infidels, the Pentagon, the FBI, the DOJ. And that's exactly what he's done. He's reaching a deal with them. Here's someone who said, I will go to the death with you for this battle that he made up in his head to attack Americans, this ideological craziness that goes on. And in the end, he's still a coward, and he's always been a coward.
Thank you for continuing to carry that torch for all those we lost that day. We really mean it when we say never forget. Thanks, Rob O'Donnell.
Thank you, Larry.
There is more to come here on O'Connor tonight. I hope you keep it here. This is Salem News Channel.